Late Night Health continues. I'm Mark Allen along with the insane Daryl Wayne. We're going to talk about love, sexism, racism, and the death of romance. Our guest is Sabrina Strings, Dr. Sabrina Strings. She's a professor and North Hall Chair of Black Studies at UCSB, which when I was going to college, UCSB was a party school.
It was a party school then. Actually, I think it's not so much of a party school now, much to the sadness of our students.
Okay, that's good. What do you mean the death of romance?
Well, I think that your audience will be aware young people aren't forming relationships the way they used to. In this country for approximately 100 years, which is how long Americans have been dating to find long-term committed partnerships, we've never seen this low level of young people entering long-term relationships. And that in and of itself is evidence that we're seeing the end of something. And I think it's the end of romance.
You mentioned a word, partnership. That's
Mhm.
a new word in regarding relationships.
Is it now? Well, I don't know if it's a new word. I think it's probably been incorporated into mainstream conversations, especially spaces where you're going to have conversations with straight folks from queer communities. Because historically, queer people would talk about their spouse or their partner before the right to get married, in particular. But now these terms are used more broadly.
Within the Black community, is it even more prevalent that young people are not getting into long-term relationships?
It is, especially for young Black women and girls. For a very long time in this country, we've been hearing that Black women have lower rates of marriage. Well, what people don't know is that after the end of slavery, which was the very first time in which Black women in America could get married, Black women's marital rates exceeded those of white women. And it wasn't until, yeah, around about the 1960s where we're seeing the sexual revolution and free love and also the right to form committed interracial partnerships that we start to see Black women's marital rates declining.
Are all relationships in young people decline? Did Black, queer, white, purple, green, everybody?
That's it. It's happening across all different types of communities. I used to be a sociologist at another University of California location. And I remember having a conversation with one of my older colleagues. He was a white man, he was a boomer, and he was experiencing this distress. And he was saying, you know what? I have two children in their 20s, and neither one of them even have partners. Like neither one of them are in relationships. And, this is such a revolution for him because obviously in his generation, you would have met someone usually as a teenager or certainly by the age of your early 20s. And you would expect that this relationship would blossom into something that would lead to commitment and marriage. But that's happening less and less often amongst young folks.
And what about within and I'm going to use a window, if you will, a gay window within the gay community, and that would include everything, transgender, everybody. Is it also true there as well?
One of the interesting things about romance is that for a very long time, and this is part of the reason why we're also seeing it in decline, romance has very clear gender roles. And so when we talk about what a romance is, it's actually a specific type of love story in which a man is supposed to be brave and valiant and courageous and willing to rescue a woman. And a woman is supposed to be docile and pliant and sweet and compliant. And then also of high status and considered attractive. Now, with these gender roles structuring romance, we can see how it would be very difficult for a person who is gay or trans or non-binary to even find a role within this. And so in queer communities, finding love, finding partnerships has always been a much more, I want to say, fugitive act. It's usually existed outside the expectations of romance.
Is it also true that the way we find romance, the way we find a partner today, is totally different than 30, 40 years ago? I mean, people are dating they're dating their iPhones. They're not dating people.
Yes, exactly. And sometimes I think about these dating sites almost like pimps themselves. And it's like, okay, you pay us a bunch of money and we'll find somebody for you. It's like, well, this is a curious form of sex trafficking if you want to look at it that way. But that's absolutely a big part of the problem. I mean, if you go on one of these apps, what you're going to see is a series of faces. And usually people are making determinations about the kind of partner they want based almost exclusively on appearance. You look at a face, if you like it, you swipe to the left. If you don't, you swipe to the right, and you just keep going, looking at a variety of different people until you find one who piques your interest. Not only is it superficial, but it's also often a space where people can be absolute rakes, lying entirely about their biography in order to attract the kind of person that they want. So there's all of these opportunities for abuse that the much older system that many people don't want to talk about or go back to of arranged relationships, of calling courtship, all of these things which preceded dating, they had many more controls to prevent these kinds of abuses.
Can you imagine if your father had said to you, Sabrina, here's a picture. I've made arrangements for you.
I
Can you?
absolutely cannot envision that. My dad is a tough guy. My dad is an absolutely hilarious person, but being much like my dad, I'm sure he would never expect me in any way to accommodate this kind of request.
But I have a friend whose father did that.
Oh,
Said,
wow.
yeah, I mean, terrible. She ended up running away from home. She was
Oh, my
15
goodness.
years old.
And I
Here
really
in
appreciate you bringing that
California,
up.
by the way.
Oh, these are things that are so impossible to imagine, right? It's like, wait a minute, you're going to try to arrange my future, my long-term partner. But in reality, these were the kinds of relationships that were extraordinarily common since the birth of marriage itself, thousands of years ago. And so, of course, today we look at that and we think this is not what we want. We're independent, right? But even thinking of ourselves as independent individuals is part of the Western evolution of identity. So, yeah, I understand your friend wanting to run away, but that would not have been possible for very much of the history of the Western world.
Wow. Uh, I mentioned the iPhone. When my wife and I go out to dinner, we'll look at couples, especially young couples, sitting at another table, and they're both seem to be texting. The first thing I always want to know, right? The
So
first
we
thing, they're not engaging. And I always want to know if they're talking to texting the person sitting across the table from them.
probably not.
Probably not. Or they're saying, hey, you want to hook up later? This is a bum date.
That is absolutely possible. I mean, there would be little incentives for them to text the person right across from them unless they were talking about the wait staff. But uh, and it's one of the strangest things. It's that people have an addiction to their phones now. And so, I mean, we've talked about a variety of different types of addictions in the US society. As a collectivity, we have addressed alcoholism, smoking, drag racing. There have been so many different types of addictions that Americans have addressed. We haven't really addressed phone addiction. And perhaps that's because it might apply to just about every single one of us. I consider myself to be an old lady. I'm middle aged and I don't want to be on social media. But I keep being forced to be on social media because this is the way in which we're supposed to build our businesses. And so increasingly, even people like me who would love to go back to the analog era find ourselves being attached to our phones.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take some time out. When we come back, we'll talk about sexism and racism and romance. I think that'll be a good thing. The end of love, racism, sexism, and the death of romance. Our guest is Sabrina Strings, Dr. Sabrina Strings, and we are talking about relationships right now, especially in the Black community. All right, I'm Mark Allen along with the insane Daryl Wayne. Be sure to join us at latenighthealth.com. More coming up. Don't go away. Late Night Health is proud of our partnership with the EBC, the Evolutionary Business Council. Check them out at ebcounseled.com.
You're listening to Late Night Health with Mark Allen. The show continues in a moment.
Recently, I met Jacqueline from Bright here in Los Angeles. She gave me a hearing exam and then showed me how to hear again with the new Signia Pure Series hearing aids, and she can give you your life back too. I hear birds chirping, birds cooing, and even my wife. They easily connect to my smartphone. The Signia hearing aids are amazing, and with the charge and go, I don't have to fiddle with batteries and hear all day long. Not hearing is frustrating for you and your family. I know you don't have a problem, but trust me, call Bright Here now for a free hearing exam, a $125 value, yours free, just for making an appointment now. There are offices throughout the Los Angeles area. Call Bright Here now at 323-424-7100. That's 323-424-7100 for a free hearing exam. There's no obligation. Call now, 323-424-7100, or visit them on the web at brighthere.com.
If you're listening to Late Night Health right now, you're part of the growing target of baby boomers we're serving. Hi, I'm Daryl Wayne, producer of Late Night Health, inviting you to join the Late Night Health family. If you have any business targeting the growing boomer market, Late Night Health is the ideal advertising vehicle for you. From vitamins to insurance, alternative health to Western-style medicine, Late Night Health caters to the growing population of those over 40 years old. This vibrant demographic has expendable income to fight aging, purchase travel, take care of aging parents, or just have fun. Find out about the advertising opportunities with Late Night Health. Call us at 805-391-0308. That's 805-391-0308, or email us at info@latenighthealth.com. That's info@latenighthealth.com. Join Late Night Health as we empower people to take charge of their own health care. Call now at 805-391-0308. That's 805-391-0308. Sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Words are a critical aspect of success. How you get your point across is a crucial part of what makes anything sell. So do it right and hire a writer. Whether it's articles, blog posts, technical writings, website content, product descriptions, or ghostwriting anything from a novel to a nonfiction book about your navel, contact Servet Hassan. If you want it to sell, write it right. Email Servet at servet@servethassan.com.
It's time to tackle a tough topic, one that affects us all. We're talking about sexism in the workplace. The award-winning Identifying the Elephant in the Room series is back and ready to tackle some complicated communications issues again. This spring, we're focusing on critical communication strategies in the face of sexism. Join us as we hear from professionals in the natural products industry who have valuable career lessons to share and real-world experience to discuss from all sides of the elephant. It's time to have an honest and open conversation about the impact of sexism in the workplace and how we can make it better for everyone. Identifying the Elephant in the Room series starts March 16th. Register today at inicivox.bfairs.com.
Late Night Health continues.
That's INICIVOX.BFAIRS.com. And join the conversation to be part of the solution.
As well as a picture of the cover of her book and a link to her website. I'm assuming you have a website, even though you don't like social media.
I do have a website, yes.
Okay, good.
That much I can tolerate.
You got it. The title of the book, The End of Love, Racism, Sexism, and the Death of Romance. How does racism work with the death of romance? And I'm going to ask the same question with sexism too.
Okay, so when we look into the history of romance, what we will see is that there were very clear ideas about the type of woman who was eligible for a romance. As I alluded to previously, a woman should be quiet and polite, a kind of stand behind your man type of lady who is also supposed to be extraordinarily attractive and of high status. Now, in the Western world, those individuals who are going to be deemed high status and most attractive are going to be white women. And so when Black women became even eligible for romances, that being when slavery was over, they had to find themselves in competition for those individuals who were considered more desirable. And in fact, even after slavery, there were Black men who were writing about the fact that now they had the opportunity to choose women who were fine. In fact, in the early decades of the 20th century, some white women used to be called by Black men silky, which was a term that was used to evoke luxury and the finer things. They would even say, some Black men would even say, there's two things I've never seen: an ugly white woman and a pretty bulldog.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Well, but at the same time, in the 20s, if a white woman was with a black man, the black man could be hung.
That's also true. So what we saw was that there were a lot of illicit affairs that were going on between Black people and white people, and especially Black men and white women, because the risks for them were so high. But you can then perhaps understand the tremendous excitement that a number of Black men experienced beginning in 1967, when now interracial relationships were legalized. And so as a result of that, and there were even Black men who were professors who were writing about it. I'm thinking about the professor Robert Staples from UCSF, who was explaining that now Black men have the opportunity to pursue white women. What a novelty, right? Partially it was novelty, but then also there was the desirability that was encoded in the beauty structure in which white women are considered to be the epitome of attractiveness.
What about the other way around? Can white women find black men attractive and pursue them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's one way in which, this whole idea of Black men being mandingos, which is obviously a racial stereotype that is not true, but does exist in the minds of a lot of people who are unaware of the fact that this is a stereotype. And I'm reminded of the story that was communicated through Frantz Fanon in his book, Black Skin, White Mask, of a white woman who was just desperate to find a Black man because she wanted to have that mandingo experience. And so she finds a Black man, they have sex, and she's like, this wasn't any different from having sex with a white man. And so there is this way in which all of these ideas that are racialized are living in our minds and causing us to act on stereotypes, only to ultimately realize that there was no there.
What about within the and I'm going to use that umbrella gay community again? Is it any different in there as to white black relationships?
Yes and no. In queer communities, there's definitely a much greater acceptance of BIPOC people. But we do find that in, for example, gay male relationships, gay men across race, so this will even include many men of color, including Black men, will often express a preference for white men. And so in any type of dating scenario in which white men are an option, they are often preferred. Amongst lesbians, we don't see the same type of racial preference. And for some other groups that are newer, these terms are sort of really just cropping up since about 2013, we don't really have enough data to make those kinds of assessments.
How do you research something like that?
Well, we've got these sociologists hard at work investigating these social media sites, these dating applications. And there's a great book called The Dating Divide that's done by a group of sociologists, in which they reveal patterns of dating selection on the apps over the past decade. And they mirror very much what we would have seen in decades past. So people in many ways are still choosing partners based in part on racial identity.
And at the same time, I mean, we all have our likes and our dislikes. And so you see a woman or a man, transgender, I'm trying to be inclusive here, and you find them attractive or you don't find them attractive. Isn't that the first thing that both men and women look at? I mean, you mentioned that with the dating apps when we talked about the iPhone.
Well, this is one of the difficulties because we think of attractiveness as something that just lives within us. Like we don't understand why we want the things that we want. But in reality, when these intrepid sociologists that I've mentioned start compiling what it is that people are looking for, overwhelmingly, men are looking for features associated with whiteness. And so there's no reason to assume, for example, that Asian men, Latin men, and Black men should naturally prefer women with these qualities. Instead, it appears that they have learned that these are qualities that they're supposed to want and that these are high status qualities, and that pursuing a woman of this particular identity might come with social benefits.
What kind of benefits?
Well, I can give you an example. I have a friend, also a sociologist, doing a lot of sociology talk today, not sure why. And she is an Irish woman, but there are those Irish people who are considered like Black Irish, like
Right.
their identity is white, but their features don't always read as white. Let's put it that way. So she had a partner who was a Black man, and she said, "You know what? We were stopped by the police so many times, and I felt like," she's saying, "I felt like it was because of the fact that I am white that they A, stopped us, and then B, let us go." And so if you're, for example, a Black man being stopped by the police, most of the time, if you're by yourself, there's no real reason for them to let you go. But having a white female partner might then, at least in this woman's experience, give the Black man an opportunity to have a little bit more safety.
What about in Europe? Is it any different there? I know that in France, black performers, Louis Armstrong, and others of that in the 20s were much more accepted than they were here in the United States at that time.
Oh yeah, it's really hard to talk about Europe because there's just so many different things that are happening. But France, in particular, is a place that I know a little bit of something about. I lived in France for a while, and I can say that on the one hand, it is different, especially for Black Americans. So when I was living in France, I remember a friend telling me that I was an honorary white person, which or provisional white person is the way that they described it. It's because it's like I'm Black, I identify as Black, and I'm proud of that. But being American gives me the privileges that are usually accumulate or usually associated with whiteness in France, and it's true. Whereas if you are, for example, a Black immigrant to France from sub-Saharan Africa, you may not receive the same treatment that I would receive.
And what about a black man from America living in France?
Black men are largely feted, from what I've seen, American Black men in a variety of different countries. I've been hearing that Black men are all the rage in Germany for whatever reason.
Wow.
They've got a whole Black male fetish going on.
We are out of time. I really appreciate your being here. Thank you very much, Sabrina.
Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
It has been fun. The name of the book, The End of Love, Racism, Sexism, and the Death of Romance, Beacon Press, published this year,
This year.
2024, right? And congratulations to that. I'm Mark Allen. Daryl, thank you very much for keeping us on track.
My pleasure.
And thank you for tuning in. Have a great week, everybody. Most importantly, have a healthy week. We'll see you next time. Bye bye for now.